Cool. So, number 2 of the trip.
Yeah.
How many more to go?
Oh, stop touching.
How many more to go?
One Saturday, Sunday,
5?
Monday, Tuesday.
Oh.
Try and block a bunch in, eh?
Very busy.
Yeah.
Very busy, but it's good. We enjoy it.
Yeah. It is good fun. And it's good fun coming to people's studio.
Yeah.
Like, we battled with this. We could get more out there if we just done it on Zoom. But it's like, what's different for anybody else doing it on Zoom?
Yeah.
Like, and then there's so much more to talk about. Cheat code for podcasting, do it in someone else's studio. Because when conversation dies, point at something and ask what it is.
What's that?
Yeah, total cheat code. Everyone's like, nah, it's not. And I'm like, watch the podcast.
But you do know
watch
now,
how many
in
times
any
I've done it.
podcast that you guys do, I'm going to be listening out for the moment where it's like, what's that?
Yeah. And you're like, and Jack forgot questions at that point. Yeah.
It's brilliant.
So, let's get cracking.
Yeah.
What is Zoe Wilson stone carving?
I am Zoe Wilson, which is a good start.
Yeah.
So I am a stone carver, hence the Zoe Wilson stone carving. I started out originally as a stonemason.
Right.
Stonemasonry, I think, is more of an umbrella term for anything to do with stone. So I started out making granite kitchen work surfaces, then fell into an apprenticeship making architectural stonemasonry. Everything from like door surrounds, steps, string courses, anything on a building, basically.
That's cool.
And I loved it, but there was a little creative itch which wasn't quite getting fulfilled.
Okay.
And I unfortunately got made redundant, but in retrospect was the best thing that happened. And set it by myself. Was doing my own masonry, and then got chatting to a guy who was a letter carver. Turned out to be one of the, I don't know, maybe top 5 letter carvers in the country.
Nice.
A guy called John Nielsen, absolute legend of a letter carver. And he taught me lettering in exchange for me shaping headstones for him. So I was doing all the dusty angle grinder stuff, and then he was teaching me how to draw lettering. And it was through John that I learned about Sitting Guilds of London Art School, and I enrolled and did a 3-year diploma in historic stone carving.
So you hadn't done any of that before when you were doing the architectural stuff? You hadn't done the diploma, or you hadn't done any formal education other than an apprenticeship?
I did a degree in fine art painting.
Right.
Okay.
And absolutely hated it.
Okay.
What made you hate it?
It was really conceptual.
Okay.
And I didn't know at that point that I was about craft. So I was really interested in the craft of painting, not necessarily in just the ideas behind it. And so it wasn't until I left that I suddenly migrated towards making something and things having a purpose. And I also properly vouched to never, art wasn't my thing. And I find it really entertaining now that I've come a full circle, and I would now say, ooh, sculpture. Yeah. Sculptor, maybe I'm an artist.
Yeah.
And I kind of hate admitting it because But yeah, it's come around now that I'm obviously really interested in the concept behind things. Mm-hmm. But it's because for me, it's about the making, and then why are you making it?
Right. So it's the process that you've fallen in love with.
Yeah, definitely.
And are you still was that the same process when you were doing the architectural work? It was just the creative itch that then pushed you to do it this way?
No, the architectural stuff actually, I wasn't doing a formal apprenticeship. Right. And a formal apprenticeship in stone masonry would definitely be mallet and chisel the whole way through.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be let loose on angle grinders. And because, mostly due to the economic climate, I was really having to make sure I was useful to stay there.
Right.
Everything was angle grinders. I basically didn't lift up a chisel for 3 years.
Really?
And so I learned everything on a 5-inch and a 9-inch angle grinder.
You're brave.
Yeah. Brave or stupid?
Guard on, guard off.
Guard off. Come on.
Yes. Don't let the HSE hear this one.
No. Yeah, guard off. And I think I probably learned how to wing it. And it really didn't sit very
Some skill that, eh?
Yeah.
Some skill.
Yeah. But I just found it really didn't sit comfortably with me. Mm-hmm. And I found I didn't have any confidence in my own abilities.
Right.
Because I had no foundation. I didn't know why we were doing things the way we were doing them, or what the best practice was. We were just doing it the fast way. And it was working.
Yeah.
And I'm still, if I pick up an angle grinder, I'm still pretty quick
with
them. but it just wasn't the kind of foundation that I was really looking for.
Right.
And so actually, although letter carving wasn't necessarily the direction I wanted to go in, it was amazing because John was teaching me, you know, how our lettering formed originally. Like, why are we making marks like this? How did writing come about? What did it develop from? And I felt like I just had this huge, I guess just like foundation, a weight of what we're basing this all on. And that started to like help build my confidence. And then I realised that I probably needed to go back and do some sort of qualification in it, just for me, really, just to ground me and make me realise that, you know, I think I needed to be able to say, I know what I'm doing. I've got a diploma in this.
Right.
And I don't think you do have to have that. But for me, I was at a point where I needed it, definitely.
Right. And so how long ago was that you walked off of how long were you doing the architectural stuff for? What does that timeline look like to now?
Okay, so it was, so obviously I did a 3-year degree originally.
Right.
And then I was a year working in the granite manufacturing company.
Right.
And then it was 3 years as a apprentice stonemason. And then I think I was about 2 years working for myself and doing the sort of second informal apprenticeship in letter carving.
Right.
And then it was 3 years at City and Guilds of London Art School for the diploma.
Yep.
And I graduated in 2016 from that. And so since then, I've been...
It takes a while to find out really what you want to do and where you fit in, like, you know, or your niche, I suppose.
Yeah.
It just takes time, and people need to realise it doesn't just happen. You know, people are frustrated at the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, well, that's fine.
I mean, I didn't set out as a 6-year-old girl to be a stone carver.
No.
You know, I was really into ballet and pink things.
The options then was a princess or a pony.
Pretty much.
One of those two. Yeah. I remember it maybe about 10, 12, 14. And my dad always brings it up. Like, I wanted to own a scrapyard. And it's because I watched Scrap Heap Challenge.
Yes, love that.
And I'm not convinced I've ever let go of that dream.
Yeah.
But that was like I changed loads of times and then found product design. I mean, you've changed multiple times. I mean, and they're all still within the design and create. And I mean, that's the important thing, isn't it? It's all still within the sort of design and creative world. It's just like jobs are so niche and so specific.
Yeah, and you just don't know what jobs are out there when you're that age either. I mean, how do you know about... I really remember people saying to me, so what are you going to do? Go and do, like, the world's your oyster. And I was like, I have no idea at all. And it was the most stressful question to ask somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I think looking back on it, I think craft has always been like a massive part of my like growing up. And my dad was always in the garage, which really was a workshop, making things with wood, or my mum really likes making dolls' houses and makes the most amazing like miniature turntables and things. And we were always like, my brother and I were always helping them do things. So I think craft was always there. Yeah. And even like I think art-wise as well, I always really liked the making side of art, not just the sitting and drawing.
Yeah.
And I think looking back on it, you know, somebody could probably have spotted that I liked making as a maker.
Yeah.
I just didn't know that about myself.
Well, this is it, and there's so many different avenues you can do within that. So, like, I mean, I've got a Scottish higher in art, and I don't think I've touched a pencil or it was all the making side of it. Whereas you've got the same qualification, and even through university, it was the same. We done a very similar course, and there were very different outcomes.
Yeah, I was more like aesthetics. Something needs to look nice, and you're like, it has to work. So having the two skills together were quite
ideal.
We worked well at uni.
Yeah.
I was like, I need help with this, and you're like, oh, I need help with this. You know, it was quite good.
Yeah.
But
it was good. So what was certainly back then? What was that like, stepping onto a site and doing architectural work as a female in stone carving? Because you look at it from the outside, and if you said stone carver, excluding your work, because I think your work now, certainly, in knowing you a bit more, represents yourself and it has a more feminine side to it. But the architectural stuff, you immediately think burly guy, big chisel, big angle grinder. How was that for stepping into a world of work?
Interesting. I think maybe also I didn't seek it out. So there was a stonemason who came into our workshop when I was doing the kitchen granite stuff, and he said, "You look a little bit bored."
Oh, really?
Which was true. He said, "Do you want to come and do a week's work experience with me?" And so, said yes.
Yep.
And then it was on the back of that, he said, "Look, if you're interested, I need to take somebody else on." And so I think that first step probably really helped, because it wasn't me knocking on his door saying,
right,
"Can I come and work for you?" He had sort of, not really approached me, but the opportunity had arisen.
Yeah.
And also Mark, who I was working for, was really good at completely taking the mick out of me, which was very grounding for everybody, because he kind of set the tone.
Right.
And I knew coming from him, it wasn't, and none of it was like malicious.
Yeah.
It was coming from a funny place.
Yeah.
It was all in jest. Don't get me wrong, sometimes I have a pretty thick skin. And looking back on it, wasn't necessarily all the fairest, but it did mean that I went onto site with the masons who I was working with were like my brothers.
Right.
Because we had so much banter going on between it was usually like 4 or 5 of us, but we had like quite a solid little team. And there were occasions where, I'm not going to lie, it's pretty intimidating. I was on one site, and I guess they were building a school. I don't even know how many people were on site, but I'm guessing it was like 200, 300, because it was a big school. There was loads of bricky, like every trade was there. And the only other female on site was a girl in the office.
Yeah.
And, that is intimidating,
Yeah. 100%.
But like in general, it was just totally fine.
Yeah.
Good. That's good to hear.
Yeah. I think if anything, it was me that found it intimidating rather than anybody being unpleasant or, and I think what I did find over the years was there is also a reason why most stonemasons are big burly men. I'm not saying they have to be, but it's because when you're on site and you've got say like a 10 kilogram bit of stone that's on your shoulder, and you've got to do 3 flights of ladders up a scaffolding. That 10 kilograms might not be very much at the bottom.
At the top. Yeah.
And also, I'm guessing they weren't all 10 kilograms. I'm guessing, we were carrying like 20, 25.
10 kilograms is what the risk assessment says.
Yeah, exactly. I'm guessing they were, and I'm guessing like most of the guys were probably carrying like 20, 25, 30, and like, I'm reasonably good at carrying stuff up,
Yeah.
But again, I realised it's just like, my body is not going to survive this forever. It's not a sustainable, it's not a sustainable thing.
So then the big transition to doing your own work, how did that all start? How was that like there's one thing to start it, isn't there? There's one thing to go, I'm going to go make stuff. Yeah. There's another thing for that to still be happening so many years later. Yeah, and I think the going and starting it is like the scariest bit. Yeah. It is. So I'd had like a little, I'd tested the water a little bit, because when I got made redundant, I happened across a great opportunity just on the border into Wales, actually just making a load of stone mullion windows for a house extension. And it was being built slowly, which is really unusual. Right. So there's just one builder and myself. And it was going at a pace so that as money came in each month, more would happen. Yeah. And the chap who's building it very kindly gave me a workshop as well as part of it. And so I was just making it at a slow pace. It was what I felt I was capable of doing, and I was learning, but I was also able to take on a little bit of other work. So I'd sort of had this 2 years of a sort of like little knowledge of setting up a workshop whilst also doing this other apprenticeship. And then when I finished the diploma in stone carving in 2016, I finished in the July, got married in the October, and moved to Brunei in late October. So Brunei was the location
in Borneo.
Oh, in Borneo?
Yeah.
I'm terrible with geography, by the way. There you go. I thought Borneo was Wales. Let's just put that out there.
Oh, Jack.
So you moved to Borneo?
We moved to Borneo, yeah, with my husband's work. He was in the military. So we had this opportunity to have a 2-year posting, which was accompanied. So we got married and went to live in the rainforest for 2 years.
That is crazy.
Which was great. But it was a little bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah.
And
did you still keep stone carving and stuff while you were out there?
So
Wood carving?
There was quite a funny conversation that went on. Actually, I think it was between my husband and his boss, which was we had a half a shipping container that we could take over with us, which is like your allocation. And I remember the conversation going along the lines of, is it done by volume or weight? Thankfully, it was done by volume. Yeah. So, in our shipping container, there was quite a lot of stone.
Nice.
And I was able to do some carving. I found it really difficult because at that point, like you said, taking that first step, I just finished, the diploma was really intense, and we were doing lots of different stuff from like head modelling to letter carving to, I did some bronze work as well, lots of different areas. And I didn't really know at that point what my like artistic voice was. I wasn't even sure I wanted to be an artist. I still was sort of thinking I was going to be a restoration carver or like working on the House of Parliament, something like that, which obviously wasn't possible. So I started just dabbling with what came into my head. And so in that time, if I look back, there's a really eclectic mix of styles. I was fortunate that I was able to do a few commissions out there, and that was great because it gave me some direction. And actually, it's like somebody setting a brief, isn't it?
Yeah.
Suddenly I had some limitations if I want this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And so I could work within that. And it's really interesting now, if I look back, I can see where like the styles have started and where the ideas kind of grew from. It was almost like that 2 years was planting the seeds. Mm-hmm. And I was also just surrounded by so much Islamic art that I'm absolutely sure now, looking back, that's where the geometry obsession started, even though I didn't realise it at the time. And so it was a really fascinating...
Fun experience.
Yeah, great experience, but really frustrating at the same time. It was like this high highs and low lows.
So that was going to be my next question, where the geometric thing came from, but you've just sort of described there. So when was it that you really set that as your... This is me. This is Zoe Wilson.
This is my thing.
Yeah. Because like we see geometric carving now and immediately associate it with yourself.
Yay!
It works.
So we came back in 2018, and we had our son just at the beginning of 2019, and I remember distinctly sitting one night. There were a lot of nights of sitting, obviously, with a newborn. Yeah. And we weren't anywhere where I could carve at the time. And I just had this idea of this geometric pattern, and I couldn't work out how you could physically make it. Okay. Because if you draw lines down on a piece of stone and they intersect each other, as you carve through one channel, you're sort of rubbing out some of the lines.
Yeah.
And the more you carve, the more your lines disappear.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't work out what order you had to do the process in to make it work. And it's actually the piece behind you over there, the yellow and blue one.
Okay.
It's called pyramids. And I couldn't work out how to make all these pyramids really perfect within the shape.
Because you would be taking a line away every time you went in.
Yeah, and also what is how do you make those shapes? It wasn't something I'd done before. And so I just spent evenings sitting in my own head, kind of carving just in my imagination, thinking like, well, if I did this and this and this. And I've got to a point, because I've carved so much, this is going to sound really potty, but when I'm imagining carving, they're always a V-cut for me, which is the same as letter carving. So that's where that stems from. And I basically take a walk at the bottom of the V-cut. So the V-cut is like a valley.
Right.
And I'm taking a walk in the stream at the bottom. And that's how I kind of imagine my work, is when I'm working out the order and the process of doing things, I basically just, in my mind, take a little walk to work out the feasibility of how these things are going to...
That's so interesting.
Interesting or slightly weird?
We'll find out, because it's all going live in a couple of weeks.
I'll be like, this was definitely weird. So I started, and then when I actually got carving, I just found the whole thing really exciting. And it was the first time since leaving college that I felt, oh God, this is me. This is really like the precision I found really interesting. And they're all, I mean, as much as they're not letters, it is like my language of communication, if you like, because it's all the same techniques and processes that I was using in letter carving, all the same like intersections and things, just in a pattern. And I've definitely always been, I'm saying to somebody, the reason I'm not a letter carver is because I just don't know what I want to say. Yeah. Like I don't have anything to say, she says on a podcast.
We'll revisit that at like the 2 hour mark or something.
She has plenty to say. But I've always been interested in pattern. And so I think that was the kind of, I felt like I was suddenly tying up.
Language.
Yeah. But I was tying up the skills that I was interested in, the process I was interested in. I suddenly found this vehicle of what like aesthetically I wanted that to look like. Yeah.
So is it process or is it the outcome that attracts you to it? Is it what keeps you coming in every day?
I think it's got to be both for me.
Right.
And I would say probably 50-50.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely love the process, but also obsessed with the product or the outcome.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't find the process as interesting. Like it's a challenge, the process. The carving geometry, there is just nowhere to hide. There's no room for error. And so you have to be really patient with it and methodical. And if I wasn't making something at the end that was satisfying, I don't think I'd find the process interesting.
Right.
So it's definitely got to be, it's got to be both.
And what does the process look like? If you're sit down with your flat slate or your sphere, what does that look like from you start to finish?
Always a pencil and a piece of paper first. I've tried doing it on the computer, but I think my brain just thinks with a pencil in my hand, you know. So pair of compasses.
Blank piece of paper?
Blank piece of paper, pair of compasses, just playing with pattern. And I tend to find that a pattern will start to like grow, or I'll find something interesting that I think maybe, I wonder what happens if I try and do 4 of those within the circle, or I wonder what it would look like if I did this. There'll be some sort of question that comes up.
So you're starting off with something in mind as to where you expect it to go, or is it just blank?
I think that depends. Like sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's another.
Right.
I think quite a lot of my ideas come from the previous carving.
Okay.
And so I'll be thinking whilst I'm doing that as like the next question, if you like. Right. Sometimes it will be, and this used to happen more like before COVID. It was always I would have seen a pattern somewhere. Maybe like a tile, or I remember seeing some sequins that were really interesting. It would be something random. And then, of course, COVID hit and we stopped seeing those day-to-day things. And I suddenly had this panic of like, God, where am I going to get my inspiration from? Because it was all being external. And so I think then I started sitting and just playing and almost making that inspiration happen by creating my own patterns.
Right.
So I think it's a bit of a mixture, really, to be honest. So I sit and play with the patterns. Sometimes that process is really quick and I find something within an hour. And other times I just have to put it down. And I like to do that whilst I'm still carving something else. So I might then pick the carving up again, just to kind of forget about it. Sometimes it can be like a week and I'm still battling with this like idea.
Right.
And sometimes it never comes to fruition, and other times you have a breakthrough. And then I draw it full scale. I usually draw it a couple of times full scale, so I really understand how it works. And then I scribe it down on, let's say it's a piece of slate.
Right.
So I etch it into the surface. I used to draw it with pencil, and I've learnt from my mistakes. Because as you're carving it, you rub off all the lines.
Right, okay.
So I've learnt from that one. So now so I scribe it down, and then it's just a mallet and usually 3 chisels of different sizes.
Right.
And that's it. I just really, really quietly chip away.
Very, very small chips.
Very, very small. Well, no, to begin with, they're a bit bigger, but small chips and a lot of time.
And then how does that transpose to carving something onto one of your spheres?
So the spheres are a newer venture.
Yeah.
I started to feel a little bit limited by it hanging on a wall. I think I wanted the viewer to be able to move around it more. And I was also interested, I think light is like one of the key elements of carving. You know, that's what finishes it. If they're not well lit, they can look really blank.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing when you have a sphere is you can move it towards the light or away from it.
Right.
And my spheres also sit on either a rope ring or a little leather pouch, because I really want the viewer to be able to move it, or if you buy it, like it, you know, it's kind of up to you as to how you want it in the room.
Oh, okay.
I don't necessarily want to say it has to be this way up and at that angle, you know. So I started. I was interested with how that process just worked, and I actually was going to carve a cube, which is sitting behind the camera over there. Really big cube that's still a cube. And I just couldn't get the ideas. Just didn't flow with a cube. What I was doing was treating each surface of the cube as a flat piece of stone.
Right.
As like individual wall hangings.
Yeah.
But
And I was like, it's not
one surface.
Yeah, I was like, it's not really, they're not linking for me.
Right.
And so then I had this idea of a sphere.
Oh, okay, so the cube was pre-sphere.
Yeah, and it's still a cube, so that
It's
doesn't
still a
work.
cube. Yeah. But
Maybe
it's got
one
multiple
day.
spheres.
Yeah. It might come back in, but it sits there, you know.
Nice.
But yeah, like you say, the sphere, and actually that is exactly it. It's one surface,
Yeah.
but like round.
Yeah.
And I just found that fascinating. And then I went down a whole rabbit hole of spherical geometry, which is a whole nother thing, because you can't draw a pattern on a piece of paper and put your compasses on a sphere and make the same pattern, because it moves around the surface.
Yeah, it feels like there's a bit of drugs needed to do that.
Yeah.
It feels like that's a difficult sober task.
Yeah. So they started off really simple.
Right.
This red one here is the second one. The first one was just, I basically carved a cone into the sphere.
Yes.
And that was it. It was just
That one was at a click,
circle.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure I've seen it somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, it was, yeah. It was just a circle, because that's all I could work out how to draw. And it just went in. But I liked the fact that I'd measured the circle so that the point of the sphere was at the centre of the stone.
Right.
And I really liked that idea. And so this red one with the cone sort of coming out and going in was the second one.
Right.
And so they're getting more and more complex each time as I'm learning the spherical geometry. And now what I'm really interested in is I draw on paper, I carve it flat, and then I try and carve it on a sphere. And so I'm taking the same pattern and I'm like using it in different ways.
Do you think you can do that on a sphere?
Yeah, I do actually.
Do you actually?
Well, the one behind you over there with the all the circles.
Yeah.
So that stone, and then that's the red one. So that's the first time I've done that, and I definitely think that's an interesting little one. This buff coloured one here is based on that gold one over there.
Yeah.
For anyone watching, we'll get some.
We'll get some footage afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
For anyone watching, it's loads of really complex shapes that are all perfectly the same size. Yeah. It's a bit mesmerising.
Yeah.
So you moved over to the. Do you think the sphere is now more representative of you than the flat stuff? Where or do they all just sit in a product range?
Yeah, I think they all do different things for me actually.
Yeah.
All interesting in different ways. I definitely haven't left the wall pieces behind.
Yep.
Also, I don't think I can get slate spheres big enough.
Right.
And I love carving slate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a definite bit of the process side that's going to keep me doing that, just because I, have this absolute love affair with Welsh slate. So
you said something quite interesting there, that they both do it for you. Do you one thing that we've seemed to see a lot of people get not caught up in, but go towards and then very quickly realise and then come back to, is doing what the customer wants to see or what they perceive the customer wants to see. How have you not let that in, or have you let that in, or has it just always been, I'm doing this for me and this is the way it is? Because ultimately that's what people are buying into.
It is, yeah,
you,
absolutely, yeah. And I can totally see that you are running a business, so it would be bonkers to make something that nobody likes.
Yeah.
I mean, so far I've just found that some people like the flat ones for the wall and some people like the spheres. So I think maybe I've had a bit of an easy time with that.
Right.
That I haven't found that one thing's been unpopular or so much more popular that it's kind of led me in that direction. I've also, I think so I now make casts, limited edition casts of my flat pieces. I haven't yet done them as spheres, but I am planning on doing that. And they're made out of a product called Jesmonite.
Yep.
And I find that really fun because I can then gild it, or I can have a different colour. Like we'll have to put that photo as well. There's a pink one over there, pink and gold. And so that kind of gives me a bit of a freedom to experiment. And so I think maybe as a business, I'm also looking that the flat ones that I make, I can then take a mould of it, make a limited edition run of it. I've also just started selling prints of my carvings as well.
Okay.
And so you can now buy posters, and then there's the spheres. And I would like to start doing the same sort of idea with the spheres, because it takes so long for me to carve one individual thing. I've got to make that product work for me.
Yeah, multiple times and multiple price points, presumably.
Exactly that.
So how do you transpose that into a print?
So as a photograph.
As a photograph?
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
So far they're just the wall pieces.
Yep.
I will do the spheres as well. They'll translate slightly less well, I'm guessing, because it would just be a photograph of it.
Right.
Whereas the wall ones, you there is actually a test print up on the wall over there behind you.
Oh, yeah.
You still get the same thing that you would do if it was, well, not the same thing, but a similar thing to if it was hanging on the wall. The light isn't going to move around it in the nice way it does in real life, but you have a snapshot of light falling on it.
And where do you find your customers? Like, how do you get around that one?
I mean, isn't that the golden question?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone wants to know the golden question.
We're asking everyone because we're trying to work it out.
So my Instagram boom has definitely helped a lot. So that really started happening. So in 2000, so we came back from living abroad in 2018. 2019 we had our son, and then in the July of that year we moved up to Aberdeen.
Right.
Cool.
And then lockdown hit the following, was that 2020?
Yeah. 2020.
Yes.
And I, at that point, realised that if I was quietly chipping away in it was then a shed, no one was ever going to know about my work. And I made, the realisation that if you're doing something you're passionate about, you also need to shout about it.
Yeah.
Kind of happened. And so I, stupidly decided to build my own website, which took forever.
Always does.
Yeah, it always does. But there was a thing on Instagram, or I think it was Facebook actually, called Just a Card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was this business, and they were helping you set up your social media and stuff. And I met a really nice lady called Melissa who runs Wild Current Marketing through that. And Melissa just kind of gently, really gently guided me through how to set up Instagram and how to take a photograph and what to write on it and what a hashtag was, because I definitely didn't know that. And so that was really 2020. And then a year later, mostly because Melissa badgered me so much about it, I started making reels and suddenly found that people really liked watching stone carving.
Yeah,
they do.
And I had one reel. I remember we were on holiday in Cornwall and my mum wasn't with us, and she was madly sending me messages on about an hourly basis saying, oh my goodness, that reel has now had 200,000 views. And then an hour later it'd be it's had 400,000 views, and it went up and it had 1 million.
Yeah.
And then it kept going, and I think it had 22.7 million views.
Wow.
And I mean, I just had no concept of I don't even know how many people that is, to be honest with you. I mean, can anyone picture that? It's a lot of people.
Yes.
And I found my followers just
rocketed.
Absolutely rocketed. And then stayed, which was really nice of them all.
Yeah.
And since then I've had another few reels that have done the same thing to keep it going.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
you put out quite a lot of reels, don't you? You put a bit of time into that.
What's your trick? I mean, I know it's your work. Everyone loves your work, but
I think it's the I find Instagram is like having colleagues, because I don't have colleagues on a day-to-day basis, and I now have a great following of engaged followers who have a little chat with me, and we have little in jokes and things, and they send messages, and I really enjoy it.
yeah.
And for me, it's a great way of like inspiring yourself to turn up, because if it's really wet and it's cold in the studio, you might think like, oh, maybe I'll just do some jobs at home today.
Yeah.
But then there's this little bit of me that's just like, oh, I did say yesterday that I was going to do a live Instagram though. I probably should just go and do that. Yeah. And then I'll come in and that's it. Then I've started carving, haven't I?
That's good.
And so actually...
it's actually the accountability side of it.
Yeah. Instagram makes me accountable, and I love it for that. And I definitely use it for that as well.
Oh, okay.
And same thing, I think making reels, I feel it's a way of like letting my sense of humour come out as well, because, I'm watching all these other reels of like, and there was one, it was the audio was just of a woman like high heels walking across the street. And there was just rafts of women, videos of women walking down the street in high heels being like, yeah, she's got it. And I was like, so much more to us than just walking down the street in high heels. Come on, And so I did it to me carving. So me carving was the timing of the noise of the heels.
Right, okay.
And
it's not here's the sound that all men want to hear one, is it?
No.
And then it's, oh man, I will show you afterwards. I have got the best reel. Oh man, I found it the other day and I went,
that's it.
I can't remember his name. Yeah. I will put it in the show notes. Some comedian, and 2 hours doom scrolling, gone. Oh man, it was so good. It was so good. It was much like when I came across your Car Hearts Are On one. I was like, Kate, get her in the next edition.
Yeah.
Like, it
Car
was wicked. Yep.
Got the Car Hearts on. Yeah. And I think it was just that. Like, I was watching other people's videos and I was like, that would just be so funny. Just removing it from all of what it should be. And basically, I just make reels about what I'm interested in, which is carving.
Yeah.
And it works.
That's fine.
So works.
And I find them funny, and then I like the comments, and so there it's an entertainment for me, really.
It's really interesting that you say it's like your colleague. It's the first time I've seen anyone look at it in that way, but I totally get it. Like I totally get it. Like you're right. You're sat here yourself, or maybe it's only a 1 or 2 man band, but you've got. It's the community you're building around it, isn't it?
It is exactly community. And I find, I think I'm probably quite fortunate that in general my followers are really lovely. And they ask really interesting questions. Quite a lot of them are makers as well.
Yep.
I definitely learn from them. And, I'm really happy. I'm forever answering messages. If anyone's got any questions, I'm always like, well, these are the tools I'm using. I'm really happy to share that because I think, we've got to promote craft. And I find that with the spherical geometry, I actually put on my stories at one point, I was like, I'm trying to do this and I have no idea how to go about it. And one person replied saying, oh, you need a Leonard sphere. And I was like, what on earth is a Leonard sphere? And it's like, it's a plastic sphere, and it has transfers that you can put on it, and it has pens and the right sized ruler to fit it exactly.
Ah, okay.
And it's a way of drawing geometry on a sphere, and
life-changing then.
Absolutely life-changing for me, yeah. And I think I had to order it from a guy in Germany, and it's like, it's not a big company. And then somebody else, when I'd got this Leonard sphere, sent me a link to a guy who'd been writing a document about spherical geometry, because I couldn't find anything on Google either. Like, spherical geometry just is this niche thing, And I got this document, and then he actually emailed the guy because he said he knew him, and I had this amazing link then to the most niche, like 4 people who understood what I was going through. And I was like, okay, I can mark the North Pole on a sphere, but how do you physically mark accurately the South Pole? Because I was like, I just have no idea how to do that at all. And we got into these really fun, in-depth discussions, but that was just all from Instagram.
That's wicked, eh? Yeah. That's really, like, if you can use it in that way, and like you say, you've got a really good follower base and you've not got any of the negativity, like How would you ever find out what a lenosphere is?
I
will
know.
100% Google it when I get home.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Because I don't even have the words to be able to Google it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the difficulty you have when it's something practical.
Yep.
You don't even know the words. So I think going back to like your original question, I definitely have found a lot of my buyers come through Instagram.
Right.
Not necessarily immediately. I've got a reasonable following in America. I do find I ship quite a lot of stuff to America now. And I think there have been some great opportunities through Quest, Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Trust.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that. Yeah.
And I think the combination of physical exhibitions, which I still think are really valuable.
Yeah.
I think doing that and then talking about it on Instagram makes your followers appreciate that you are actually a serious craftsperson, artist.
Yep.
And so they then have confidence in your work. And I found at the beginning of this year, I had an exhibition in Edinburgh at the Scottish Gallery, and simultaneously an exhibition in Cardiff at the Makers Guild, Wales. And I had two similar pieces in both. They were both on slate, and it was one was a spiral, and another one was the same spiral but carved differently.
Right.
And so I had one in Scotland and one in Wales, and the same person bought both of them.
Really?
Who was one of my Instagram followers from America. And so he'd seen it. He'd seen that I'd put it in the gallery in Scotland. He got in touch with them, and then he contacted me to say, did I think that the two would hang nicely together? Which I absolutely did.
Yeah.
And so he actually ended up buying both of them through the galleries. And I know that, well, I don't know, but I suspect that wouldn't have happened had I not been exhibiting.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
And it wouldn't have happened had I not been on Instagram.
Yeah.
So that's amazing connection there.
Yeah.
Both.
And the same, the one of my pieces that sold at Collect,
Yeah.
that was, again, one of my Instagram followers, because he
Right.
contacted me afterwards to say.
So Instagram's fair to say is your main driver.
Yeah.
Yeah. By a long way by the sounds of things as well.
Yeah. It's kind of, sometimes it's hard to quantify, isn't it? But
Well, yes, that's true.
Yeah, it's
Like,
hard.
is it working? Is it not working? You know.
Yeah.
But what you can be sure of is if it wasn't there, it wouldn't be working.
yeah.
Is the reality.
But I
of it.
also don't think I would just sell through Instagram if I wasn't doing the exhibitions.
Right.
So I think the two kind of...
So the exhibition and trade show thing is also quite important to you to be
I
doing.
think so, yeah.
And how many of them are you doing roughly a year?
I mean, it's only been since 2020
Yeah,
that I
that's true.
started. So I've only really had kind of 2 years, and there's been some COVID in there as well. So this year I've had four.
Still, that's a number. Most people are doing 1 to 2 a year that we speak to.
But I don't know if this year is an anomaly or whether, and I'm finding that Instagram also breeds other interesting opportunities, probably like this one.
Well, exactly. We wouldn't have found you if it wasn't for Instagram.
Yeah.
So I think kind of love-hate relationship with Instagram because it's absolutely the best we've got. There's so many difficult things on it as well because so many people are on it. But then that's what makes it so good, and it's
free. And I feel like when you're a small business, like free marketing is,
it is.
You've got to give some time to that.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you said a lot of your stuff's going out to the US. How do you tackle shipping stone to the US?
It's always a
The
good
big question
Yeah.
for every maker, shipping.
Yeah. I mean, there's a very nice box behind you that's all ready to go.
Okay.
I have a shipping company, Ebis, if anybody wants to know.
Yeah.
They deal with lots of they were the main shipping company for Collect. So you had to get all your work to them first, and then they delivered it into London. And that was the same for the entire show.
Right.
And I've just built up a rapport with them. And
And are they the ones that are providing the crate and stuff as well?
yeah, so they make the crates for me.
Take
They
note.
line them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they line them. They deliver the crate to me empty. I've given them dimensions. I put the piece in. I don't need any other packaging because they've got foam in it. And then they come and collect it, or they arrange for the courier to come and collect it, and then they ship it. They also deal with all of the documentation and
That sounds very stress-free. That's what you need.
yeah, absolutely. I do occasionally do it by myself if I'm shipping casts around.
Yeah.
And it just every time turns into a headache. And for the amount that I save doing it myself, it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
And actually Brexit made a really big difference as well, because I think just around the time of Brexit, I was shipping a piece to Belgium, and I actually had already made the crate for it. And then I discovered that you had to use a certain type of wood.
Oh, wow.
Like it has to be treated, and it has to have a stamp on it to say that it's like certified and stuff. Basically what pallet's made out of.
Right.
And I was like, I just don't understand enough. And I also, I know you guys will get this as well, running a small business, you have to wear so many different hats that it was just an area. I was like, look, there's a shipping company who know all about this. I just don't need to know it all. I can just ask them and they can tell me. And actually, I really like that now. And so I just build into my pricing. If it's international, I tend to halve the cost with the buyer.
Right.
And if it's UK, I mostly cover it.
Right.
That's a good start.
And I think, I don't want to put people off buying it because they're worried about how it's going to get to them. And it's heavy.
It's a worry, but you know.
I think they insure it, and it's just like you say, you just got to take that out of your concern, haven't you? And just
well, this is it. So for anyone that is listening, we'll need to post a picture of it. It's like it's that sort of Roadrunner Acme style crate, isn't it? It's all boxed up and it looks the absolute ticket.
It does.
But it's, I mean, the shipping and the paperwork side, somebody dealing with that. I mean, we were getting chased this morning for, was it a Dutch tax office for 19 cents? Because of, don't get me wrong, we'd paid it all right. It's that
it's not our
the
fault.
banks, our bank's exchange rate versus their bank's exchange rate were
Has
different
changed
to the,
since you made the transaction.
And I'm just
it's
like
19 cents. And we're
that's
just like, there's
something else I
something
have
else.
to reply to and do.
Yeah.
In between
It's
everything.
bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I've got a piece going to Australia, and it's like I have no idea about what Australian imports about. I have no idea. I can't do it for every single country. So, so I just don't.
Perfect.
And it is expensive. Like it is definitely a big expense.
Even for a magazine, gosh, whatever the weight of stone compared to a magazine, I can't even.
But I only tend to box them up when I sell them.
Okay.
Right.
So you've got the offset of the fact that you've made a sale.
Yeah.
So, as long as the two
And
are
then you build some of
fairly-
that boxing up and shipping price into the cost of the piece.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we notice is one of our biggest metrics we're trying to get down, isn't it? Is the amount of people that start the checkout and then see the shipping price and drop off.
Yeah.
Because we can see exactly where they've dropped off on our
Yeah.
website. And it's disheartening, but at the end of the day, we can't do anything about it. We often toy with the idea that we just put the shipping price in, but the shipping prices are changing weekly for us at the
Rapidly.
minute.
Yeah.
Like,
And then
all
you
of
can
it.
end up
Wild.
not making any money at all.
Exactly.
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
is.
it's
And I'm
super
having to do it
difficult.
for every other country of the world. Like I've got this spreadsheet from our fulfillment service, and if somebody asks me, "Oh, can I get 5? Can I get all of them?" I'm like, "Yeah," but I have to check it like all the time because it's just
Yeah. I've just been doing this with the prints because I wanted to do international shipping. And so I have 3 in the UK. I've got one price for America, one price for Europe, and then one price for the rest of the world.
Yeah. It's easier
was
when
just
you
like-
can do it like that.
Yeah.
But
it's also, it's a piece of paper. It's not a magazine. So, it's not going to be nearly as big.
Yeah, the price and versus weight thing. And then some countries now or some shippers just won't ship to a certain country or won't ship. So somebody could ask for 3, ship no problem, but then have to order the second 2 separately. And it's just something that's out of our control, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the other thing I found as well is that, galleries on average take 50%.
Right.
So I obviously have to build that in. Like I have a gallery price. And so if you're doing it through a gallery, they'll also sort out the shipping.
Okay.
So they'll take
Usually.
50%, but usually they'll do all the shipping. That'll come off their 50%.
Yeah, I mean, it
anyway.
might be that I've made the crates for them, but then they do the actual transporting cost.
Right.
And they obviously deal with the client and all of that side.
Yeah.
And so I remember somebody saying to me that you keep you've obviously got to keep your price the same because you don't want to undersell galleries. That's just not cricket.
Yeah.
But actually what's happening is I'm then paying my marketing side of my company, which happens to be me.
Yeah.
But I'm paying my marketing side 50%. And so that's where some of the shipping costs come out of,
Right.
Right. Okay.
is that 50%.
Right.
And that's the way I kind of look like it pays, it starts to pay back for my website and back for the time I spend on social media. And, I think sometimes people think oh, you're just taking double. It's like, well, no, I'm just actually only take half when it's a gallery.
Yeah.
And do you know what? Even if you were taking double, you're doing like 8 jobs.
Yeah,
As a small independent maker, it's
absolutely.
like double is still
Yeah.
woefully underpaid.
Yeah.
Because the few times that you do get paid, you're still getting underpaid. And that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
So how do you tackle quantifying all that time and all that expense and the time putting into it? We talked to Jamie and Lucy at Kilsyth, and he was like, we try and ROI everything other than going for a coffee. Like it was very clear. Like you get so obsessed with where is my time going, because that's effectively where your money's going.
Yeah.
How do you kind of walk that walk?
I slightly bury my head in the sand. Is the answer?
Thank
to
God
that.
we're not the only one.
Yeah. Because I carve because I love carving. Yes, I absolutely, it is my career. It's my only job. But I do also have a toddler.
Yeah.
They take up quite a lot of time. And I don't think I could sit down and write, these are the hours I'm getting paid for. Because I think it would just freak me out and I wouldn't do it. And actually, I would still carve even if I wasn't making money. Like it's a passion, So the fact that I can make money out of it as well is a bonus.
Yeah.
And I think in my head, I've always just had the long game as like, you've got to start off and then hopefully one day in the not too distant future, someone's going to recognize you.
Yeah.
But you're just
your
working
sales.
on your branding and your you've got your person, like people are buying into you, which is, you get a lot of like makers that don't show themselves, and I find it's harder to buy into you if you don't show yourself. It's hard.
Yeah. What's the marketing? Know me, like me, trust me.
Yeah.
Is how people buy.
Right.
And so I absolutely couldn't sit down and tell you how long I spend on Instagram making reels. I don't want to know.
No.
But I do also enjoy it. And I think this is the other bit, that actually, if you're not going to keep track of exactly where your time's going, it's got to be because you're enjoying what you're doing. So like, I'm enjoying my day to day. No, I don't know exactly how much I've sold because of Instagram, but I feel it's, like in my head there's a balance there that it's worthwhile doing.
Yeah, and like the bottom line is, or the top line is, in your head, you're happy doing what you're doing, and it's covering bills.
Yeah, exactly
And
that. And as long as that's happening, and I'm seeing a yearly increase. And so that gives you the confidence to say, oh, I should stick at this. It's okay, let's keep going.
I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
I feel that's something that certainly artists and people that deal with galleries are more in tune with than what you would maybe say is a maker. Like, it's about what it'll make in 10 years or what it'll make in 20 years. When the name becomes a big name. I feel that's something that artists have definitely more in tune with and better at sort of trusting the future of it. So the quest thing, did that all come from the gallery work, or how did that all become?
No, so
Talk to us a little bit about what the quest thing actually is.
So Quest, Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Trust, are a charity, and they originally started as the sort of the charitable arm of the royal warrant holders. So anybody who supplies to then the Queen, now the royal household, can get a royal warrant, and the royal warrant holders were then giving a certain amount of their profits to charity. And they now do still operate like that, but are a charity within themselves, and so still need to seek funding from other places as well. And they are there to support British making, and they have a healthy pot of money each year to divvy out. Twice a year, you can apply for a scholarship. So I applied at the beginning of my diploma in London because slightly uncharacteristically, I started my diploma without enough money to complete it, which did not sit comfortably. But it was so expensive, I couldn't do anything else. And I was so determined that was what I needed to do that, I seemed to just manage to ignore that and carry on. So I applied in my first year and didn't get it. And then by my second year, I think I was so in need. My application was probably a bit punchier.
Right.
And thankfully I did get it in my second year. So they supported my tuition fees for
Right.
the rest of my diploma, which was fab. And then since then, I feel like I approached them initially because of the financial side. I didn't really appreciate at the time how much support was going to come from it afterwards. Because once you're a scholar, you're always a scholar.
Ah, okay. So it's a lifetime membership.
It's a
club.
lifetime membership thing, yeah. And there are an amazing group now of Quest alumni who are so supportive, and they're all amazing makers. So
And that's who you were at Collect with, wasn't it? It was a Quest hall at Collect.
Yeah. So Quest had a room there, and they were showing what they do within the craft community by taking some of their scholars along to exhibit their work, and I was one of the ones.
That's awesome.
And again, like that opportunity to go to Collect is something I've really been wanting to do, but it puts your work in front of the gallery owners as well as the buyers.
Yep.
So it places you in the right kind of in the right environment.
Yeah.
And actually, I'd also been to Artifact with Quest as well, and that happens at the Design Centre in Chelsea Harbour.
Okay.
So that's more the interior design kind of market. But again, it was an opportunity to go there, and I feel like Quest are great at. They just want you to succeed, because if you succeed and you're a success story, then they can go back to the people who give them the funding and say, look, this is,
what we're doing.
This is what we're doing. This is what difference it makes. And so I've had the opportunity over the years to speak at a number of Quest events as well, like Royal Warrant Holders, AGMs and things like that.
Awesome.
Because it's such a mutually beneficial thing, because again, it's a room full of people who are my target buyer. And all I have to do is wax lyrical about how great Quest were to give them the money, which is not difficult to say. And, what a difference it's made and what I'm now doing.
Yeah.
And so, they've been such a huge stepping stone for me. And just help with everything as well, because they do workshops as well. And it's a really supportive network.
That's what you need.
Yeah, it's exactly what you need.
And does that also get you access to all the other makers they support as well? Is that like a little boys club kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, girls club as well.
Girls club as well, yeah. You know what I mean? The old adults. Makers club, yeah. And so
we do.
How many people are they supporting?
I can't remember the exact number. I've actually just been told it recently, which is very annoying. I'm gonna guess it's around 400.
Oh wow, okay.
2 to 400. Let's go 2 to 400 to give me a bit of leeway.
Yeah.
That's how many scholars they have had over the years. And then twice a year, I think they maybe take on another 10 to 15 each year.
So it's reasonably...
I might need to check those numbers, to be honest.
Yeah, it's reasonably
small,
prestigious, small, select community, but
also
it's still 400 people. It's a lot of people to support financially.
So they were over the years, so they don't still. But I mean, you only have to look at the application form to realise that it is a fairly prestigious thing, because that application form is a beast.
How long did that take you?
I mean, a good couple of weeks to do it well, because it's all, it's very open-ended questions of where you see your work going, what your influences have been, where you see yourself in 5 years' time, like exact breakdowns of how you're going to use the funding. Like, it's not a, we're just going to give you a couple of grand, This is a big deal. Yeah. And you then, once you get selected through to like the finals, you then have to go for an interview, and it's a proper in-person interview in a boardroom.
Right.
Gives me the fear.
Yeah. And you have to give a presentation, and so it's a big deal, but it does mean that once you're in the club, I found at college it gave me a massive boost that people believed in me.
Yeah, not just the financial boost that it gave you, but the confidence.
Yeah, and I really wasn't expecting that at the time, but it was just, oh gosh, that knowledge that somebody thought what I was doing was good.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's worth so much.
Yeah, it is.
It gives you the motivation to just keep going. It does, for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so that was really interesting. But Quest have been fab.
Yeah, sounds like you'd recommend them to anyone doing similar.
Yeah.
And they are more for traditional crafts, if I'm right.
Yes, traditional crafts, and it tends to be, I think, more to do with education of those crafts.
Right.
They also offer apprenticeships as well.
Okay.
They have an apprenticeship scheme. And I think they're always really pleased when one of their scholars then comes back to them to say they want to work on the apprenticeship scheme with an apprentice, you know, because then
So
that's
that
like
would
the
be
full
taking
circle.
someone on an
Yeah,
apprentice.
so if I ever took somebody on, I would definitely go back to Quest and say, look.
And is that something you're looking at? Would you take
Yeah,
someone on?
in the future, definitely. I don't think I'm quite there yet. But yeah, in the future, I'd love to do that.
It's good to have that vision to have that to do, you know.
Yeah.
It's
Well, and also to pass on, because, you know.
keeping the craft alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Passing on your
Do you view
skills.
yourself as much a custodian of this as you do as a maker, as an artist?
Yeah, I think so. I think because there are so few. I mean, stone carving is one of the crafts where there actually are a few more people. Like, it's not one of sort of the endangered list, you know.
Yeah.
But
not much like you.
no,
There's a lot of we've met a couple. I say a lot. Like there's a lot of insurance salesmen. There's not a lot. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of call centre people.
yeah.
But we've met a couple of letter setters, but nothing like this. This is still
No.
very unique in itself.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that will do well for my sales.
Yeah.
Is that I have found a little niche, but I think it would be interesting, certainly somebody who's done letter carving and interested in letter carving, to then come and play with pattern, you know. I think is a good, and I definitely think I've quietly sort of established a little routine and way of doing things, which is probably also quite unique to carving geometry.
Right.
To do with, you know, precision and keeping that level of accuracy. Letter carving is definitely the most comparable.
Right.
But you're right, I don't really know anybody else who's doing.
No, not geometric stuff. Definitely not. And we know Matthew that does the letter carving. I've seen a couple of people in the US. Well, it's headstones, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, there's always going to be a market for it.
Yeah. And there is, there's the Lettering Arts Trust in the UK.
Okay.
And there's another one, Memorials by Artists as well.
Right.
So there are lettering communities. Actually, there's quite a strong lettering community in the UK, and it's really nice because it's such like a family.
Yeah.
And I sit in that as well. But just.
And are you welcomed into that, or are you the?
Yeah, no, I am.
They're not like they're not like, this is Zoe. She's the letter artist. She can't spell, so she just does patterns.
I am dyslexic, so
There
I think
you go.
maybe that's also why I didn't like lettering.
Yeah.
But I think because I had the training from John Nielsen, and he is very much part
Right.
of that community. I think again that kind of gives you that grounding to say I might be doing pattern, but
Yeah, but I've learnt for the
I
top
do know,
dog.
yeah.
I think that's who you've learnt from seems to be one of the big jump ups early on. You know, you go back to Sam and Rich that were done with the documentary. They learnt from Ernest Neil. I'm going to butcher this.
Yeah, just don't.
Yeah.
They learned from someone.
They went from someone, but I remember them being like prolific in rush seated ladder back chairs. They were like the go-to guy.
Yeah.
Or the person they learnt from also learnt from that time's go-to guy. And that seems to have really set them off on the right path.
I think the interesting thing as a maker is you can reinvent the wheel to a certain extent, but you only have like one lifetime's amount of working time to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And like a lot of craftspeople don't find their craft when they're really young. You know, there are some young apprentices, but like I didn't finish my diploma until I was 28 or 30 even maybe, so like you don't have that much working life to be able to learn everything from scratch again.
Yeah.
So you need to go and find somebody who's learned it all and who wants to impart all that knowledge so you can learn faster and then you can build on what you've learned and then pass that on. And I think that's the,
Absolutely.
that's why your teacher is so important.
Yeah. And finding someone that's not only good but can also teach, because that's quite a rarity.
It's a definite skill in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, if being able to actually teach the craft or wanting to teach the craft.
Yeah.
There's so much ego, I think, attached to, and not that these people are egoic as such, but there is always ego attached to this kind of thing that people don't want to, like, no, this is very much mine.
Yeah.
You've got
I
a
get
very,
that.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I get it. I feel protective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over carved geometry.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I I don't own the rights to it. You know, I don't own the rights to carving. I don't own the rights to geometry. I get it. You can go and do it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I would hope another carver wouldn't try and do exactly the same thing because it's my way of communicating. And so, it would sit uncomfortably if somebody was trying to do exactly the same thing.
If you seen a sphere with a very similar geometric pattern.
Yeah, I would be a bit like, maybe you could do your own thing.
Yeah. Have you ever come across something like that?
One of my Instagram followers managed to 3D print one of my designs and then cast it in concrete. And it was really good. And that scared the living daylights out of me.
Really?
And actually, he was just doing it for his own interest because he was learning how to 3D print and, so he had his own interest. And then I was suddenly just like, please don't sell it.
Yeah. How did he approach that with you? Did he
he just sent me a message on Instagram. He said, look at this, I've made this.
And you're like,
oh, okay. And I was like, yay.
Yeah.
And he was like, can I tag you in the images of it? And I was like, ooh, no. Because then people might confuse that I've made it. Yeah. And I was like, I'm really happy that you've investigated it and you are going on your journey. And that's lovely. But it is, it's a funny. I mean, as a maker, I wouldn't want to just copy what somebody else is doing. And I'm really happy to be the inspiration for somebody's thing.
Yeah.
But you just hope that there's a bit of a maker's code where you don't want to just
tread on someone else's.
Or just replicate it. I mean, that's part of the interest for me is coming up with the pattern and the ideas. And, would hope that, people wouldn't want to do that. But who knows?
But it may happen.
It may happen. Yeah.
So what does the next couple of years look like for yourself? Have you got plans for that, or are you just quite happy?
So I moved into this studio.
I was going to ask you about the workshop.
Yeah. So that was only this summer. So I'm really happy having found a space.
Yeah.
And like you say, I think over the last few years with COVID and everything else, like I feel like now, like you were saying, I've maybe found my niche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's a certain kind of like happiness that comes with that from the fact you're not. There's a I don't know, I found it quite panicky when I didn't really know what my voice was, and I now have found it, and I realise I have found it. So I'm really just looking forward to being in a space and a time when I can just make, and I can keep exploring these ideas, developing them further. I'd really like to go big, but big also comes with some finances.
Yeah. How big?
Like big.
Big.
Yeah. Well, like how big can I go is the other question.
Right. Yeah.
Spheres have a limitation as to how big I can make them, how big the piece of stone is. If it's wall stuff, I have limitations over the thickness and the weight that you can hang on a wall. Mm-hmm. But then I'm also looking at maybe I could do multiple tiles, again, out of Jesmonite as well.
Yep.
I'd like to do some sort of repeating pattern. I was thinking that maybe you can hang it in different orders and so I'd really just like to kind of keep going and just keep keep making. Like I really enjoy it. So now I've put all this time and effort in. I guess it's a kind of like I've been setting up the business, if you like.
Yeah.
And now it's just time to
groundwork. Do you feel like the groundwork's done
now?
Yeah.
Well, or mostly done.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it's ever done.
No.
There's always something, isn't there? But I feel like I now have a good platform. Like I understand how it works, and so I'd like to just keep building on that.
Yeah.
And it would be lovely to start sort of casually taking on somebody else to come and do some work as well, like roughing out work or whatever.
Yeah, something just to get their hands in, get started a couple of days a week kind of thing, and then
exactly
build on
that. And like I miss being in a studio with other carvers. That's really fun. That's really nice. And so I'd like to get back to at least having somebody in from time to time.
Is there many makers here, or is it just you?
Next door, there's an amazing wheelwright. Oh. And he made the wheels for the King's Troop for the gun carrier that carried the Queen's coffin, which I think is a fairly amazing thing.
Pretty good, yeah. Good CV point.
Yeah. So he has an amazing woodwork shop next door, which just smells incredible. And so it's just, we're the only makers here. Right. And then there's the gardeners and
how did you get it? How did you get the space?
Through the local pub landlord.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So we live in the village, and our local is great. And I was talking to Craig, who's the manager, and I was like, Craig, I'm looking for a workspace. I'm not finding anything that's quite right. It's too officey, or, it just doesn't feel right. And he just sort of said, have you spoken to Sophie up at the lodge? so came up to here, and they have an open gardens and things, and got chatting. And she was like, we do have one room. She's like, but it is a bit kind of rough and ready. And I was like, sounds ideal.
You're like mint.
Yeah, and I walked in, and the first thing I saw was the tree trunk holding the roof up, and the brick floor. And I was just like,
this is perfect. This is what
I can make a mess, and it's okay, and I'm not going to annoy anybody with carving noise. Or, so I moved in June.
It's a great find. Like it's but and you're very sensible not to go for something that feels too officey or too, because at the end of the day, that's your background to all your Instagram, which is your marketing, which it all feeds in.
And that didn't link before, so there's a bit of a running joke in the family that I've just upgraded one step at a time, and I think it's really nice to start off right at the bottom and work your way up, because then you appreciate each step.
Yeah.
So when we moved, in Borneo, I was working in a very weird little room, which had no air conditioning. We had to put an air conditioning unit in it, and it had like ceramic tiles, and it had absolutely no character at all. That was like my level 1.
Yeah.
I had to build my workbench out of pallets, and And then I came back to the UK, and we were in a military quarter, and there was no outside space other than the bin store.
No way, did you carve a bin
so
store?
Our wheelie bins lived outside, and I was in the bin store, which was the width of about 3 wheelie bins, and just had a shelf, which was a table in my eyes. No lighting or electricity, so we ran extension leads in. And I just had this really tiny little space, and I was so delighted. And then when we moved up to Aberdeen, I had shed. I don't know if it was an old coal store or something, but brick built, no insulation, which was an experience.
Yeah, in Aberdeen.
You guys know. That was interesting, and it was really cold. And then when we moved down south, we had a little. I think it was actually built a little music studio, like a little summer house. That was the warmest thing, because it was well insulated and it had loads of windows, and that was so warm.
Yeah, it was a dream.
That was the dream one. And then it was in a rental we were in, and so our rental was coming up to the end. We were looking to buy, so I knew I was kicking myself out. And then I found here, and although here is cold, obviously with the log burner, it's with a fire in, it's pretty nice. And it's much
full of character.
It's full of character, and it's the first space that I felt represents, like you were saying with the photographs. It feels like me. And I found that has just been brilliant for creativity. And because it's an open gardens here as well during the summer, there are people around, but I can shut the door. So next year I'm going to start doing like Friday mornings is going to be open studios.
So is the open gardens out that side?
Back that way, there's a walled garden. And it leads down to the test, and it's really beautiful. Great for your picnic lunches. But really nice, so I can engage with people when I want to. And I was feeling a bit isolated before, so this is really nice.
A good balance.
And that might be, that could easily be a customer that just pops by.
Exactly, and particularly, Hampshire is a fairly affluent area.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right. I think that would be really nice to. But I just like having a chat with people as well.
It breaks up your day.
Yeah.
It is always good.
You don't want it all the time, but you just want it enough
you
to
can
dip
choose.
in and out of it.
You can choose whether you have it or not.
So is this you guys set now? You bought down here.
It.
This is where you're going to be. You're not going to be moving with.
I refuse to move again. House-wise, I refuse to move again. But also stone. Every time we move, my husband and I both curse the fact that I'm not a jeweler. And it's a lot of setting up, and oddly, I always find I need to nest quite a lot in the space so that it feels like your workshop, like your creative space. Like, I find that really important.
Of course.
And it's difficult doing that often, So so that's it. I just refuse to move again. I'm staying here.
That's good. So if your husband wants to move somewhere else,
he's on his own.
You're staying here. Quite right.
Yeah, I'll just commute.
That's it. So We've actually talked about loads. We've covered absolutely loads. Is there anything you wanted to cover with what's happening with you in the future? We've talked about what the future is for the workshop and stuff, but what else have we not covered that you want to talk about?
I don't know. I think, like I mentioned about the prints, because that's the thing that I'm launching at the moment. So, but we've talked about that.
And that's quite good because it's making something it's going to be costly. I don't know the cost on them, but they are going to be costly purely because of the labour that goes into them.
Yeah.
But you are able to replicate them in prints and make them much more affordable. So if someone with lesser budget, someone like Kate and I that don't have the budget, that still really appreciates your work, can get
something of
it is obviously a picture of it that you can hang up, but it's from you. It's from the person that's made it. It's a bit more connected than just something.
Yeah, I did it as well because I really miss my carvings when I sell them. That sounds so bonkers, doesn't it? Yeah. But because I spend so much time making them, you get to know the stone and like...
Kind of sending that little bit off with a bit of you.
It is absolutely a bit of you because you've spent so much time making it.
Yeah.
And when we came back from Borneo, I suddenly discovered how important British stone was to me because I had been quite homesick when we were abroad. I don't know if homesick's quite the right word, really. I missed people, but people came out to visit us. But what I really missed was like the countryside, and like I missed like the UK in a way. I was like, God, this is a really weird feeling. And when I came back, I found that carving British stones had been nice before, but then I just found I had this like new affinity with the material because it's literally my bedrock. Like it's what's underneath us here. And I suddenly found that was like a really important thing to me. And I think it's partly because, I was spending 3 weeks with an individual piece of stone, getting to know its characteristics, and then the fact that was British as well somehow just, I don't know, links in better. And so I remember describing it once to somebody that carving for me is like reading the best book you've ever read.
Right.
So you pick it up at the beginning and you're a bit like, I'm not so sure about this, I'm not so sure about the characters, and you start chipping away at it and it's okay, but it's, and then you get to a point where you're just like, oh, we want to see what happens next, and it turns into a proper page turner, and like you can't put it down. And that's me, like halfway through, and I like literally have to get peeled out of the workshop. Like I miss meals and stuff because I'm like, oh, but I want to see what happens when I finish this one. I want to see what it looks like when I've done that bit, and and then I really can't put it down. And then about 3/4 of the way through, I start slowing down because I'm like, oh, I can see that this is going to come to an end, and so I start like reading a bit slower. So carving slows down a little bit, and that's usually where I pick up a pencil and start working on the next pattern.
Right.
Because I've still got the reassurance of having this one that I love.
Yeah.
So it gives my brain some time to like, and also maybe I'm looking towards what the next one might be, and I need to start getting a little bit excited about that.
Yeah. Before you finish that one.
Yeah, and then towards the end, like it's like the last bit. You absolutely want to turn that last page and read what happens in like, the culmination of the story. Like you want to close the book and be like, oh, that was a great story. And then at the same time, there's this awful bit for like a week afterwards where you miss.
Yeah.
You miss finding out what's happening with the characters. And it's like, you've got to know them. And I get like carving blues. And straight after I finished a carving, I'm always just like, miss that carving. I'm never going to get that carving again. And so it's this really weird feeling. So photographing for me was really nice because you get the memories of that carving in a.
It's like a portfolio, isn't it? It's like you keep a portfolio of it. Yeah.
So, but then I was thinking like I would actually like to have my images up on the wall because a portfolio is okay, but you have to dip into it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas if you walk past it every day and that makes you smile every day,
great. I do like that piece. And so I started documenting them for myself, and then I thought exactly that. Well, actually, this would be really nice. I have to say it was mostly as well for Instagram followers because I know that there's a really lovely community there who are hugely supportive and like my work, but maybe they're not my target audience because I do have to put a high price tag on them because they take so long. But I know that's not possible for everybody, and I don't want. I can't carve loads of cheaper stuff. you know, and
It
sell
wouldn't be as fulfilling for you, would it?
I can't afford to do it, you
Right.
know, and it would take too long. Like there's a reason why it's expensive because it takes a really long time. So I would devalue myself by doing that. And I was trying to think of a way of sharing my work so that, like you say, other people can buy into it, and access it and collect them. And obviously the collection will carry on growing. So so it's just going to be like £45 for a print, and it's going to come as a poster, and then you can either frame it up. I've done it the right size so it fits in an IKEA frame.
Oh, okay.
So that if you are on a bit of a budget, it's okay, got you covered, you know.
IKEA frames are ideal.
They're good.
yeah, they're great. Well, that one's in an IKEA frame, and they're just ideal.
Yeah.
And equally, you can take it to a frame if you want to.
Yeah.
And I went through the same thing with postage. It has to come in a roll because otherwise I wasn't going to be able to keep the cost low enough.
Yeah.
So if I
all
frame
these things
it,
you have to think about when you're selling a product, you know.
yeah. If I frame it, I was going to have this problem with posting it around the world. You can't really post glass very easily. So I was like, we'll just keep it cheap and cheerful.
Yeah.
And then people can have.
And that's that end of your product line.
Yeah.
Done and dusted and sorted. One thing that you mentioned there is finishing it. Like, I'm terrible for over finishing and ruining shit. Like, how do you stop yourself doing that? Like, where's the finish?
Yeah.
Yeah. But when is it done?
So if I'm carving a piece that has sections, well, they all have sections. So like, if you think the overall pattern has individual sections within it, I finish each section. So I don't half do one and then move on to the next one.
Right.
I complete each one. So like the finishing strokes on it and everything. So that little section is done. So I never have
right through to that's how it'll look when it's sold. It's absolutely
it's absolutely done. Each one is done. So it's just a carving process.
Right.
And to make sure the angles are exactly right, because I carve at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
So to make sure they're absolutely flat, I do a running stroke afterwards, which is just a load of little taps.
Yep.
And so that's what gives the texture in the work at the end. And because I'm a bit picky about it, I like all the chisel marks to line up nicely. And the bottom of the V has got to be straight, because that's what you're seeing in the geometry. It's not just the tops of the peaks, but the bottom of the valley as well. So the angle has to be spot on perfect. And so that's the process, is doing each one of these little sections. So actually, when I get to the end, all I've got to do is the same thing I've been doing the whole way through, is finish that last section. And that's it. I put my chisel down and I don't touch it again.
Right.
Because there is no other step. I've done each one. I've finished each one.
Whereas if you maybe like got everything to set A, then set B, then there's the keep going over.
Yeah. You could keep going.
Yeah.
And you could keep checking the whole thing over and keep checking. Whereas I just found the process for me was each bit is done, then it's done, and you move on. And so you're actually finished when the pattern. It's like colouring in.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, when like there's the big hit, isn't there, of adult colouring in books, like these really complicated patterns. But you don't then finish. You don't finish colouring in each of the sections and then think, I'm just going to go back over all the yellow ones.
Yeah.
You just don't do that because that bit's finished. And so that's how I finish. It's just done.
Yeah, it's just done. It's finished.
That's it.
No, I always wondered that because it feels like something you could go over and over and over again and just totally ruin it, like you did.
Yeah.
So you need to be super strict with yourself of when it's done.
It is also it's quite stressful. At times.
Yeah.
Because of the level of accuracy, and like when you're carving, you've carved one section. If you're carving the section next to it, you've got a really thin point.
Well, that was exactly my point. Like if you went one stroke too much on that and knocked the point off it.
Yeah. Really annoying.
Yeah.
How many times have you done that?
I used to do it more than I do now, and actually I have recently carved a couple of pieces where I can hand on heart say there have been no errors in them.
It's working then.
Yeah, it's working.
10,000 hours.
And there were ways of like hiding them and making them less visible and stuff like that. But yeah, that top peak is that's tricky, that bit. It's stressful. So I don't really want to go back over it.
I don't think you made life easy doing geometric stuff.
Oh no, really difficult.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'd find it satisfying if it wasn't.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, and I like the challenge. Yeah. And the challenge is the bit as well that makes when I come in, Actually, there's a reel about this one as well. It's I was going to post it this week. It's like lots of noise and people talking like blah, 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 blah. And then it says like, and the second that I like start doing whatever it is, what sport or whatever, but the second I start picking up a chisel, that's it. Everything goes quiet.
Yeah.
And I've got to focus 100%. I can't. And actually, this was why, like, during lockdown, carving was my absolute saviour.
Right.
Because we had a 6-month-old baby, and my husband was a key worker. So he was also, when he was at home, it was great. But when he was out, you know, it's concerns and stuff. And when I'm carving, I can't think, oh, what should we have for dinner tonight? Or did I put the washing on? Or, you know, like the volume of other stuff that goes on in your brain all the time. Couldn't do that. And so I found it like a form of meditation. Yeah. It was my escape from, I got all those concerns about COVID as well. It was so worrying at the beginning, you know, about your family and God, what's going to happen. It was so unknown that it was just lovely to just carve.
Have a coal bunker that you could go into.
Basically,
and just nothing else there, It makes a lot of sense.
It does.
And did you listen to music podcasts?
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
No, I again with another reel. It's amazing how your life becomes reels, isn't it?
It's good that you can think of these ideas though to do a reel with, because some people are just sitting there for I've done this about 10 times now.
Yeah,
so give up.
Yeah, that's true. During college, I did have headphones in because it was quite noisy everywhere, and I found during college. So I listened to Mumford and Sons. And I listened to the same album over on repeat for the entire 2 years.
Really?
Yeah, which is quite a bonkers thing to admit, isn't it?
Well, you enjoyed it, obviously. Or just it was kind of like a...
So it became background... This is why, it just became background noise. So I stopped...
But you're used to it.
Yeah, I stopped really listening to it. I wasn't singing along to it. It was
Did you consciously do that? Listen to the same thing over and on so it would become background noise?
Not particularly. I just... I like music, but I don't have that broader kind of knowledge of music. And it was just, I really liked the album. And so I had it on. It was like that easy thing. I'll just put this on first. And then I'd find that actually I'd listened to it like 3 times during the day. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know I did that. Yeah. And I found it was actually just a great way. That was just like my carving theme. So my theme tune for college was Mumford and Sons. Yeah. And then I was listening to a radio when I sort of started the geometry carving. And I found there was so much talk about COVID and like awful stories from people. And I just found that I couldn't listen to the radio. Yeah. And so actually I just started carving, not listening to anything. And I still now mostly don't listen to anything. Yeah. But I think I've just got into that headspace now where I just like the noise of the chisel is just really therapeutic. Get into this like little meditative place and I just chip away. I find if I carve listening to music, I carve in the rhythm. Yeah, of the music.
I was going to say.
Right. It's really annoying.
Yeah.
Fun for reels, but really annoying on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I feel like it's quite a staple go-to for you for reels.
Yeah, if in doubt.
If in doubt.
Just carve to some tune.
Not done a reel this week, just knock out a tune. So what was interesting was when you were overseas, the stone versus the UK thing. What stones? One thing we've not talked about is what stone it is you're actually using. We mentioned slate. Yeah. For your big wall hangings, but you can't get slate in a sphere.
I have to admit, I haven't yet explored that. That's like the next thing to do.
Somebody on your Instagram might be able to tell you.
Yeah, or I could just ring the quarry, which
you could do that.
The quarry probably follows on Instagram anyway, so they'll tell.
I don't know if I can get the right thickness to be able to turn it into a sphere.
So you turn it into a sphere?
So I used to, as a mason, make spheres like ball finials and things. So I know the process, and I know that the process is really annoying and long. So now there's a local stonemasonry, Farley Masonry, and they have a stone lathe. And so when they've got the lathe on the go, I just hop in there and order a few more spheres. So they make the spheres for me.
That's cool.
Which is great because then they're really accurate.
Yeah. And surely you'll have a north and south point on it already.
No, still don't because they sand that off. I know. It would be nice. I know how to find it now, so okay. So I basically get to play with the fun bit. I have to pay more for it, but equally it saves me so much time. That works out. The stone that I use is I'm currently sticking to British stone. I don't know if it will always be that, but currently that's my thing. So the red sandstone is Course Hill, and that's from Dumfriesshire.
Right.
Cool. The buff-coloured one is Portland limestone. So that's from the south coast, not far from where we are, not a million miles. And then the Welsh slate is the black one, which is quite nice.
UK,
It's quite nice because I grew up in Shropshire, so fairly close to the Welsh border, and so Welsh slate feels really kind of familiar from all the walks in Wales. You know, I feel a real affinity with that. And then actually a lot of my family is from Dumfriesshire. Obviously we lived in Aberdeen, and I think most of Edinburgh is built out of the same stones. So, you know, you kind of had that. And then where we are now is not a million miles from Portland. So I seem to be picking stones that I live near. Yeah, which is really nice.
And then so if you were to go back, I'm intrigued about going back, by the way, I am. If you're going back, give us a shout. I am fully down to see this. So, because if you could just picture something like Bergen or something with just like a massive in the square in Bergen, like just a huge carving. Yeah. But how would that even come to be? Would it need to be would they need to cast the stone, like make a big cement? Like how do you get a stone that big?
I mean, you can get massive boulders, massive chunks of stone.
Right.
Out of the ground, depending on how the quarry is extracting the stone, you can get just house size.
Oh, really?
Pieces of stone. Yeah.
Right.
You need to Google stone quarries to see the really massive.
Kate's looking at me like, please don't do it. You're too busy the next 5 days.
You're definitely going to do it.
Yeah, 100%.
So you can get the stone big enough. You wouldn't be able to put it on a lathe then, I don't think.
Right.
Or maybe there are some. I haven't really explored this. I don't think there are any stone lathes big enough. So you would have to make it into a sphere by hand. I mean, I think you could probably get it cut into a cube, and then it's much easier to make a sphere once you've got a cube.
Right.
So I really don't know. This is kind of the fun bit. I don't even know where. I think you'd have to carve it in situ. I don't know how you would transport it. It's really hard to pick up a cube because you can't strap it because it's like there's no edges to So I don't know. Or maybe I carve something smaller and then look at getting it cast, or maybe I look at a bit of 3D printing. Like I don't quite like. I'm wondering whether going big might involve a different material.
Yeah.
To make the actual big thing, you know.
It's exciting though because you just don't know.
That's what I'll be keeping tabs on for something big.
Yeah,
100%.
Something big. So I'd like to do something big that was for outside. So like garden or public artwork, that kind of thing. That would be really interesting. And then I think big inside is more feasible because I can cast in quite thin jesmonite on a bigger scale. And so my thought with that is maybe having pieces that are half a metre. So that's half a metre. Yeah. So that size, but much thinner. And then making multiples so that you can have an overall big piece of wall art, but it's made from smaller tiles.
Yeah, I wonder if you could even do something 3D out of smaller, and almost hexadecimal dome kind of thing.
Yeah, that was a really big word there.
Yeah,
that's me. That's
your big word for the day.
I'm going to wind it
Jack's
back
big
down.
word for the day. There's a sideline to your podcast here as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a little bit of content. I think something like 4 or 5 meters. See, you're talking about the cone that then comes into the centre. I think something about the perspective of that on something so big would just be mesmerising.
I'd also love to have, I said that weird bit about walking in the bottom of the V.
You want to walk in the bottom.
I actually want to, but I want to be able to sit in one of my sculptures. That's definitely
just Photoshop yourself in there.
Well, I have got some this is my next Instagram thing, is I've got some little figures.
Oh,
so I'm going to start
making them you.
Yeah. But the big one with just the cone out of it.
Yeah.
I think that would be fab to sit
in.
Yeah. I think it would just be such an amazing seat. I don't know, just to
There's something I think about that that's
be in it.
Yeah, there's a few places. I'm trying to think of the last place I was. So I remember a very distinct feeling when I was younger, maybe 12, 14. We've got a family friend who's a torpedo driver for nuclear submarines. And
Amazing.
he got the submarine. Now, I was smaller, so obviously you remember everything bigger,
Yeah.
but it was still massive.
Yeah.
We went into dry dock when HMS Vanguard was in.
Oh, yeah.
And that distinct feeling of being, I am nothing. This is massive.
Yes.
And you get it when you're in like massive mountain ranges and there's just no one
you
else
feel
around.
really insignificant.
Yeah.
But not in a bad way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the only time that you kind of like,
The
I'm just a
perspective
little
is the
dot
other
on
way
this
around.
planet.
Yeah.
And I think something like that backwards cone is just gigantic.
Yeah.
Would be
to
amazing.
make you feel small.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I actually really like that feeling.
Yeah.
I
Quite
think there's
grounding, I
something-
think.
Yeah. Makes you feel tiny. Yeah. Really grounding. Yeah. And I think as well, like, because of my obsession with British stone, it would just be amazing to be in a piece of British stone. It just sounds so weird. But I think that would be really cool to do.
That would be cool. That would be really cool.
The difficulty would just be, working out how you
logistics and whatnot.
Yeah, but that's just a game, really, isn't it? I think what I'll probably start doing is just putting out little feelers, and then I'll probably find that ideas will develop around what's feasible.
Yeah, I think you need to like befriend an Abu Dhabi prince or a sheikh or something.
Yeah, it'd be
like
helpful, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I feel like that's the kind of thing that you could be like, can you imagine being so into? There's the money. I feel like that's the only
money.
way to make something big like that happen.
Yeah.
Or like a Norwegian governor or something like that.
Yeah, or maybe it has to be in a rough bit of stone. Sorry, I'm like, my brain's on this now. Because actually, if it wasn't a sphere, if it was a rough bit of stone, I could still carve like accurate geometry. And so maybe that contrast. Would
That's
be
quite
really
a nice
That would be
concept.
nice.
So a super rough outside, but then you do
This
something
perfect cone into
Yeah.
it, or
I love a bit of brainstorming.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, we'll
watch
bring
this
an
space.
invoice through.
A few makers said that was a bit of therapy. That was great.
Yeah.
Exactly. Kate, you've usually got a great question about now.
Yeah, I know you've got your time limit today, so the last question would be, what would you tell your younger self? What advice would you give your younger self?
To take up jewellery.
Love it.
Jewellery's later.
No, I think I spent a lot of time worrying that I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Probably from about the age of like 14, 15, right the way through into my 20s. I think I just never knew. I had a lot of friends who had really like vocational degrees, and actually a lot of them became vets. But they all knew what they wanted to go and do. There was a very clear path, and I just really distinctly remember not knowing who I was, what that was that I wanted to do, and finding that a really hard time. And I would love to tell myself that it was just going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think the best piece of advice is always just say yes to opportunities.
Yeah.
Like if you think it's going to be fun, just say yes to it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as long as there's nothing negative that's going to come out of it, just say yes to it. And I have basically built everything from just saying yes to opportunities. And actually I wish I'd had a bit more confidence to know that it will, if you say yes to stuff and you work hard and you're positive, it will work out okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it might not be what you thought it was going to be, because
okay.
stone carving is not. But I love it.
Yeah.
And I think that would be my advice to my younger self, definitely.
Well, that was a fantastic end.
That was good. That was good.
I think
Love
a few
that.
people have said that though, like, I wish I could tell my younger self that it'll be okay. Like, don't rush.
Yeah, a
There's
lot
no
of them
rush.
are, although different words, the same theme is just trust yourself.
But it's like at that point, it's amazing how many people say to you, "What are you going to do?" And it's like that's such a mean question to ask
It's
somebody.
a very hard question
who doesn't
to
know
answer.
but who doesn't know what they, that's a question you ask when you have knowledge of what other jobs are in the world,
Or
what,
even knowledge of what
or
our
you
job
have,
is.
yeah, or you have knowledge of what you like doing.
Yeah.
It's like I think that's the worst. Like, did you ever do? We had a system down here called Kudos, which was like your careers advice thing.
Oh, we probably had something, but it would have been called
it was
something
like a
different.
computer thing that you put in. Mine came out as fence post erector or pest control.
Really?
Nice.
Yeah, because I liked working outside and I liked working with animals.
Okay.
I'm like, what poor advice.
You couldn't have been like an equestrian vet or something
No,
like that. No, it had to be
no.
a fence post erector or...
Or a pest controller. It's like, I don't like killing animals.
Yeah.
I love
And I
working
don't
with
like
animals,
bugs.
specifically spraying them with highly toxic
Yeah,
chemicals.
exactly.
But
What a
that's
weird
like,
thing.
I know,
What was
but
that at school?
Yeah, but like when that's the careers advice you get, it's pretty lame,
That's
really,
pretty
isn't
poor.
it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not giving.
yeah.
Wonder what I'd have got out of that one.
That would have been
Scrapyard
interesting.
merchant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scrapyard merchant.
Yeah,
That's
was
what
a
it
little
could have
bit
been.
Scrappy. Yeah.
Interesting.
Ace.
Okay.
Well, we'll wrap it up at that.
Well, thanks very much for your time.
Honestly, it's been
Alright,
brilliant.
it's
It's
been
been great to
fantastic.
see your space. It's been great
Yeah.
to learn more about how it all came to be. and
Yeah,
what-
and,
what's
well,
for
and
the
fab, and
future.
it's such a lovely publication to be part of as well. And I
thank
think
you.
I really got that sense of like the community with the makers, and it was something that I think, particularly when I held the edition, I was just like, oh, I feel very privileged to be with all of these lovely people, you know. And I think it, you know, I
That's
think that's
what
a
we
really
hope.
nice
Good.
That's what we
We
hope.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Good.
Yes.
Oh.
Ace.
Let's finish up here. Thank you.
Lovely.